August wrap up. Hey guys, welcome back. Let's do an August wrap up. I'll tell you what I read that was good and what was bad, and then we'll go through my September TBR and new releases to be aware of for September. First, we have Love Theoretically, Ali Hazelwood's newest rom-com. This was about two physicists and it was very science heavy, especially with the politics of academia and mentors and like things like that. I do have a full spoiler talk on that book if you are interested. I will link that down below. In terms of like liking for this one, it wasn't quite for me because of like the heavy politics in regards to like in the science community. However, I did find that Ali Hazelwood's writing has greatly improved since the novellas, especially that I did not like, that I found very, very cringy. Plus, there was a lot of talk about Twilight in the book, so many references, which was so random. I was not expecting it, but I love Twilight, so I liked that. Next, we have an unexpected romance novel, Vampires of El Norte. This was the Book of the Month poll winner from August. This novel is set in the 1840s in Mexico at the brink of the Mexican-American War. We follow Nina, the daughter of a wealthy ranch owner, and Nestor, a cowboy, as they navigate the lands trying to avoid monsters lurking in the dark. Since this was the August Book of the Month poll winner, I do have a full spoiler talk for this book. Not gonna lie, I loved this book, but I loved it because it was 100% a romance novel. If you are looking for a horror novel, as this one is advertised, you are going to be very disappointed. Another rom-com, The Nanny. This is about a woman who used to be a cam girl, and now she's gotten a job as a nanny to the guy that she used to do a bunch of private shows for. But when she agrees to do the nannying job, neither of them know who the other one is. She never saw his face. When she was doing her cam girl thing, she would wear like a wig and a disguise or whatever. The premise for this book was a little wild. Honestly, I could have gone without the like OnlyFans cam girl background on this book. I actually didn't feel like it added very much to the story. If this would have been like a straight up nanny single dad romance book, it would have worked out completely the same. Since the characters didn't know who the other was, it just felt like it was insta-lust for the book because they were just attracted to each other and she's a live-in nanny. You know the trope. But besides the normal trope stuff in the book, I do think, surprisingly, the kid in the book was well written in this one. And all of the relationships in the book between the main characters and the kid and the side characters, it actually all felt very genuine. I have no complaints in terms of like characterization in this book. Also, the book was about as spicy as you would expect for a book where the main characters originally know each other from OnlyFans. Now for a tamer option, we had Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. This book, loved. It was written in the form of a journal of field notes from young professor Emily Wilde. It's a fantasy novel based in the early 1900s where she's gathering research for her Encyclopedia of Fairies. The author's world building in this one, I just loved. I loved how it's just like, oh yeah, the whole myth of fairies and like stuff like that, like it's real. And she's just writing a book about it. She's just writing an encyclopedia about it. Like she's an expert in her field and she's like this young woman professor and she's just like the ultimate expert in the field. She's very like direct and to the point and very focused on getting research for her encyclopedia. This was just the ultimate cozy fantasy with like classic English dry humor. I found it to be very charming. Emily is just this no-nonsense professor who is doing field research for her book. And then we have the main male character who is like very flamboyant and whimsical, and he might be a fairy, but that's what Emily has been trying to figure out for years. This book was just delightful, and right away once I finished it, I requested the ARC for the second installment of the series that's coming out in January of 2024. I did get approved for that, and I'm super excited to start reading that ARC, but I was thinking I might save reading the ARC for like late September, October-ish, just because the feel of the book is just very like fall vibes. And speaking of ARCs, I read A Multitude of Dreams. This was an ARC that I got, and the release date for it was at the very end of August. Initially, I was very excited for this one because it's by the same author of The Poison Season. I read that in January at the very beginning of the year. Didn't know anything about it, and I ended up reading it and being like, oh, I actually really like this. So when I saw that this was by this author, I was like, of course I want to read it. I'm so excited. Unfortunately, this one didn't really hold the same appeal for me though. The book was kind of all over the place. It was about this kingdom recovering from a terrible plague that killed a bunch of people, and some of the characters have like this secret identity stuff going on, and then also it's sort of a vampire book. There was a lot going on all the time throughout the book, but at the same time, it was kind of boring. I got to like the 40% mark and I was like, we're only 40% in. I don't know what it was. There was something about the pacing that I was just kind of like, can we go, please? I think that I was holding it to a high standard because I really liked the Poison Season. I don't know. I don't really have much else to say about this one. It was young adult fantasy, but it ended up feeling a lot more young adult than I was expecting. It just wasn't for me. Okay, lastly, we have Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. This was Book of the Month's Book of the Year winner for 2022, but I've been putting off reading it for whatever reason. But it ended up being my random TBR pick for August. So here we are. That book was a doozy. I did not love it. It spanned years and years of the lives of Sadie and Sam. They initially knew each other from childhood, and then they end up starting a video game production company together. So we go through all of their career and like personal lives, like the ups and downs for decades. This book was very dialogue heavy, and the plot was basically like, here's a couple decades of these people's lives. Side note, they really like video games. The majority of the book I found to honestly be pretty boring. It just felt like it just droned on and on and on. It was just a lifetime of bad communication and withheld information about their personal lives to try and spare hurting the other person's feelings. I feel like the book was trying to be marketed as like, oh, this great tale of friendship, but like, that is not the type of friendship that I would want. The main characters, Sadie and Sam, were just kind of like shitty people, and they were just kind of like shitty to each other. It was so strange because I didn't like the characters, and there wasn't really much of a plot, but at the same time, the book did suck me in. Like, I was like, I wanted to know, I'm like, is anything gonna happen? Like, I wanted to like keep reading for some reason. I was reading consistently up until there were like 100 pages left in the book. And if you've read it, then you probably know. So something happens that just infuriated me. And I just straight up stopped reading the book. I put it back on my bookshelf. I was like, oh, I'm done. I was like, oh, I'm just gonna straight up not finish this book. Oh, we're done here. I took an extended break from it. I was like, I need some space. I was so mad at the book. I was mad at what the author did. I was pissed. So I took my extended break from it, and I was like, well, maybe the last 100 pages will redeem the book. Maybe, you know, like, maybe it'll get better. But honestly, those last 100 pages were not worth it. I do not recommend this book. I found the whole thing to be a waste of my time. It was not for me. I'm mad at that book, honestly. And people like say like, oh, you don't need to be into video games to like the book. And it's like, that book is nothing but them talking about like video games from like the 90s. Like that's all they talk about. Like the whole thing was centered on them starting like a video game production company, which is fine. Like I play video games, whatever. But I didn't really want to read a whole book about these two people, these two creatives who make video games who can't get along, and like, it was a little toxic. I have thoughts. I'm not very happy about that book. I'm honestly surprised it won Book of the Year from Book of the Month, and now I'm like, who voted for this? So moving on, let's talk about my TBR for September. Of course, naturally, we have the poll winner for Book of the Month for September. This was The Stranger Upstairs, and this won our poll by a landslide. And honestly, I'm really glad about it. It was the one that I was most interested in. When I was reading the synopsis, I was like, there is some shit going on in this book. So I'm very, very excited to see if it's good, if we like it. Obviously, spoiler talk coming soon. And of course, we have TBR roulette. So I have a bunch of sticky notes in here with book names. I have an entire bookshelf of physical books that I'm trying to get through. So let's see what our random pick for this month is. Oh wait, I picked 2. Nope, can't do 2. I have too many other things to read. I don't have time for 2. Okay, please be good. The Buried Giant. Oh, it's short. Thank God. Okay, let me grab it. 1 second. The Buried Giant. This is by the author of Never Let Me Go, which I've seen that cover of that book like floating around everywhere. So when I saw this one by the same... So when I saw this one in like a thrift store or something, I was like, oh, that's by that author that wrote that one book that I see everywhere. So obviously I bought it. I know nothing about this book. I literally just picked it because I thought the cover was nice and I recognized the author's name. So I have no idea if I'm gonna like this or not. We'll see next month. Okay, so August was my birthday month for Book of the Month. And so I got my free birthday credit. Everyone has been talking about how good Ink Blood Sister Scribe is. And so I got it. And so I was like, I have to read this. So I'm definitely planning on reading that this month. I'm very, very, very excited. I'm so excited to see if it's good. I also am finally, I have some time coming up off of work. And so I am going to read Fourth Wing. Finally. This book has been everywhere for months. And I've been like, I'll get to it. I am finally going to set aside some time and really like dive into it, see if the hype is worth it on this book. I don't know. I'm really hoping so. Because I love fantasy romance, so fingers crossed. Also for September, here are some new releases to be aware of. Things We Left Behind by Lucy Score, Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll, Rogue by Mona Awad, A Study in Drowning by Ava Reid, Hemlock Island by Kelley Armstrong, The Vassar Wilds by Lauren Groff, Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Maehrer. So that is it for me today, guys. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you find some awesome things to read in September. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next time. Bye!